Okay, hello and welcome back to the Get to Know podcast, the podcast where, as the title suggests, we get to know someone each and every week. Today, we have a very interesting guest. He is the producer and co-host of a top charting travel podcast called Travel Talks, and he's also a senior assistant producer on Sky Sports. Alex Emery,
Yes.
hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Thank you for having me onto the podcast. Really excited to get involved.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. So, what we do at the beginning of every podcast, sort of a bit of an icebreaker, just get the ball rolling. Have a little game called the Hygie game.
Okay.
Loads of cards in a box. All of them have three completely random questions. I have no idea what the questions are going to be, and we're going to go through them.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, so I've pulled out a card. All right, this is the first question. What is the most scenic landscape you have ever travelled through?
Okay, it's a good question for me, isn't it?
It is. That's very topical.
Very topical. Let me have a little think. Scenic. I love stuff close to home, and I think we speak about it a lot on Travel Talks. We often overlook places which are near to us in the aim of going as far away as possible, but sometimes the best things are actually really close to us. I really love Snowdonia. So, of course, in Wales, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Incredibly naturally beautiful as well. The hike up Snowdon is amazing. I would also say Switzerland as well. Switzerland is a really, really beautiful country. If you think of places like Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland, it's like a valley of mountains. It doesn't really get much better than that. So I'd have to say those two, to be honest.
All right, we'll get into those a little bit later as well when we go into talking about your travels and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, next question on the card. Is there enough fun and adventure in your life?
I would say yes. Yeah, not at the moment. Jeez. Not at the moment at all. This last year has stripped every single ounce of fun and adventure out of my life. But hopefully 2021's a little bit better than 2020 was. And
Yeah.
when you kind of look at your life and find out what you value most, fun and adventure is something that I put right at the very top of my priorities. So, I would say at least in my aspirations, it definitely is.
Yeah, just past 2020 at least.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question on the card. What was your favourite thing to do when you were 10?
Oh, really, really random, deep question. I like it.
They are.
It would have just been playing football, like any 10-year-old in the UK, just a mad football fan. I used to love going down to the park with my mates, going down to the AstroTurf. You could spend days down the AstroTurf and just playing football, playing knockouts. And then you take a break, you go to Sainsbury's, and like when you're a kid, like lunch can be anything you want it to be if you've got a fiver. So I'm just memories of going to Sainsbury's and just getting like big bags of jammed donuts and just like sitting down the Astro, like huge packets of Oreos, and like your parents would be like, "That is not lunch," but equally you're just like buzzing off sugar and you've eaten like 5,000 calories of Oreos, but you burn it all off kicking footballs around.
I think even I have memories of things just constantly. You could have an entire meal off about a pound or two.
Yeah, easily.
Just go and get anything you wanted. Okay, well, so obviously you just said you had a love for football and everything growing up as a 10-year-old. So did that spiral into your Sky Sports job, and how did that sort of come about?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think anyone who knows what I do immediately is just like, oh, how did you get into that? And there's elements of luck, and you got to be careful how you phrase it, but I feel like at times you make your own luck. It's a conversation which I've had a few times with a few different people. I was quite lucky. Basically, I was at school and like you said, mad football fan. I was coming to the end of year 11 and didn't enjoy exams. Hated exams. It was what it felt like was you do hours of revision. In my case, probably not enough, like cramming near the end of exams, and then you go into the exam hall and you're like, that 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever would define your fate. And to me, that didn't really sit right, because I always feel like if you put in the hard yards and you work really, really hard, you should be rewarded for that in the whole process. You shouldn't just be that one exam that you sit that decides your fate. So I knew I didn't want to do exams. So like immediately just parked the idea of going to uni, which don't get me wrong, there's times in my life where I look and go, oh, would I have liked to have gone to university? But equally, like, I wouldn't be where I am in life without the opportunities I've taken through not going to university. But essentially, I applied for every apprenticeship underneath the sun in terms of videography, because I knew that's where my passion lied. And I'll maybe speak about that a bit later, like chasing your passions. But I was doing media studies, film studies, applied for every apprenticeship in terms of film. Got a few interviews. I remember doing an interview with a company called Digit, where their role was to upscale old media forms. So you'd have like VHS tapes, and you turn them into MP4 files. And don't get me wrong, a great job and something which would have been awesome. But I had applied for Sky, and there were a few stages to the Sky interview. And you get through one and you get through another, and it's almost like X Factor. You like through to judges' houses, and you're like down to the final 10 or whatever. And there's like 1,000 people who've applied for this role. So you're just like going, okay, let's not get ahead of myself. The idea would be amazing, but let's work really hard. And get down to that final 10, and you're thinking, I'm not going to accept that Digit interview or job role, because my God, if I accept that and then I like didn't go to the Sky interview, what could have been? Like, it's one of those sliding doors moments. But went to that Sky Sports interview, got the job in the digital media team as an apprentice. And yeah, like, I've worked really hard at Sky and managed to progress a few times since then.
So how many years have you been there for now?
I've been at Sky for coming up to 7 years. It's difficult to say. It was July the 28th, and I was 18 years old, and I'm now 25. So I think I've been there for about 7 years.
So is it sort of one of those where you've progressed like through the roles and up in the ranks sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the role I started out as was, like I said, I was an apprentice in the digital media team. So we ran the website's content. So if you go to skysports.com and look at the video section, I was working on the team that did that. And we would cover a wide array of sports, and it would be cutting highlights packages for players. So you'd see a player linked to a different club in Europe, for example, and you'd cut a highlights package maybe on a player like first base, like Iago Aspas, for example, is a really random one. But if he's come from La Liga, Sky at the time have La Liga rights, and we'd cut like a highlights package of Iago Aspas. He's linked to Liverpool, and Liverpool fans might get an idea of what this player's like. So we'd cut videos like that, and of course highlights packages, cricket highlights, tennis, all these different things. So it was working across an array of sports. And then I've progressed into doing different roles, became a junior video producer, and then the team split up, so you had to decide which sport you wanted to work on. And I was almost like, well, all of my eggs are in one basket. I'm like a mad football fan. The idea of working on cricket full time, just as much as, don't get me wrong, would be an amazing job, and there'd be people listening to this like, how privileged are you could work on cricket every day. But for me, as someone who didn't enjoy cricket, I'd have been like, this is not my dream job. Overnight, it's gone from being my dream job to something that I would have had to really like drag myself through at times. But yeah, I got the role in the football team, cutting video, and lots of changes in my role over the years.
So what's kind of the day-to-day like there for you, like the role that you play there?
Yeah, so I work for the YouTube team at Sky Sports. So it's kind of gone back from being just a purely football-based role to working across all the sports network that we've got. So if you look at any YouTube channel that Sky Sports has, we've got Sky Sports Football, Golf, Boxing, F1, Cricket, Sky Sports main channel, Soccer AM. We've got all these channels under our network, and I work for a team of 8 people. And we create content for those channels, whether that be highlights packages, whether that be in the football sense, best goals, best headers, all these kind of things. But on top of that, we get player access, and that's perhaps one of the things I work most closely on, is the player access that we get, where each week we go and speak to a player or manager from a game which is on Sky Sports that weekend, and we'll take a format, an interview format to them, whether that be like a true or false, or a fan Q&A, or a FIFA versus, or one of these ideas that we formulated, and we'll go and ask them. And what we like to do, and what I think our team does really well, is we like to see a different side to footballers. You see footballers all the time in interviews, and they do their cliche answers. Next one game at a time, good for 3 points, all these kind of things. You hear them over and over and over again, but behind these like robotic answers, there are really normal people. So we like to uncover what these people are actually like and try and show you a little bit of their personality.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. So, well, let's see your best people that you've managed to sort of get in front of.
Yeah, I've worked with some really great people over the years. Like the biggest name and one that will work for like a YouTube clip, which I'm sure this will turn into, is like Cristiano Ronaldo. I'll drop that one. Like we did a shoot where we flew out to Lisbon, and it was a sponsored event with Nike. And we had to go around Lisbon and show. My job was to go on a social tour of Lisbon and understand where essentially Ronaldo grew up, the play parks he went to, the schools he went to, all these places, and I had to do Instagram stories and Snapchat stories and that kind of thing. And then at the end of the day, we did a training event with Ronaldo where he ran through this event with young Portuguese players. And I was close to him. I wasn't directly producing that shoot, like it was a bit earlier in my time at Sky, but that was definitely the biggest name without doubt. But in shoots that I've actually produced, like I've worked with Kevin De Bruyne numerous times, like 3 times, I think. Strangely, one of the players I've worked with most often. Done various shoots with him, shoots with the F2 freestylers, and then interview series as well through RXs through Sky. Was on a Zoom call with Mo Salah the other day, which is a strange thing. And then Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, that was quite a recent one. But yeah, been fortunate enough to meet quite a few players through my time at Sky.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it sounds mad. So they're probably the biggest names. What's your favorite, your personal favorite that you've done?
In terms of a shoot that I've come away from,
yeah,
I would say it's a strange one because he's not the biggest name, but a really lovely man is Neil Morpie at Brighton. And it's more for the shoot essentially, but I took on that shoot and we did a video which you'll be able to find online called Making It Pro, where we'd uncover a player's story on how they made it pro and learn about their life coming into the game. And that shoot with Neil Morpie was the first shoot which I had produced and was like the sole producer for. So it was Adam Smith and Joe Tomlinson interviewing Neil Morpie, and he'd walk around the Brighton training ground. And a lot of the time we do like sit down interviews, which are quite contained. Essentially, if you're producing one of those, like not a lot can go wrong, touch wood. But with this shoot, we were walking around Brighton's training ground, and it required a lot of pre-planning and execution. And it was a video which came together really nicely. And I'm sure you know, as a fan of YouTube, you've got to play the game with YouTube. You can often create the best content, and if it's not hiding behind an amazing thumbnail or a really clickbait title, it can just get lost in the ether of millions of YouTube videos that get created. But like that video is not done amazingly in views, like maybe 100k on the Sky Sports channel, which isn't like mad numbers that we've seen before, but definitely one of the videos I'm proud of.
Yeah, for sure. I'll have to have a look at it and check it out. So we've mentioned a couple of times that you've been able to travel around through this job, and that's another big side of you that you love to travel, because the podcast that you take part in. So we'll move on to that now. So how did that sort of come about, the idea of the podcast and you getting like joined, I guess?
So it was in lockdown, and like I'm sure everyone can relate. You're in lockdown and you got sod all to do, and you're sat wasting time on your phone. And like I'm quite a productive person. I like applying myself to do things, and I'd spend hours watching TV and on social media, and you just come away from that experience and you're just like, oh my god, what have I done today? And in lockdown, days just merge, don't they? Like you'll find yourself waking up, going to work, going to bed, waking up, going to work, and then you get the weekend and it's like, ugh, there's nothing to do. You can't do anything. So it just bleeds into the next week. And I was, not to over dramatize it, but definitely was getting a little bit like down in the dumps, and maybe as far as saying I would be a bit depressed in like lockdown, the first at least. And I needed that outlet to be creative because I'm such a creative person. So I wanted to create online. I wanted to create on YouTube, but I didn't want to go down the route of being a YouTuber. It's never really sat inside like my personality. But I wanted to create, and the idea of a podcast came about because I love talking to people. I love chatting to people and finding out different sides to them, like I kind of touched on earlier. And I feel like in travel, it's a really untapped market for podcasts. There are
Yeah.
millions of podcasts, and don't get me wrong, there are millions of travel podcasts, but I feel like what Saunders and I are doing with Travel Talks is has the potential to be one of the biggest travel podcasts in the UK, and I don't say that lightly, and hopefully it doesn't come across as like big-headed, but ultimately, like I'm one of the my kind of personality lends itself to, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it properly, or I'm not going to do it at all. And like the experience I've had with Sky Sports, like ultimately, like I've been creating top tier content for Sky Sports, and now it's my turn to let's create some top content for Travel Talks. And hopefully the stuff that I'm making and the guests that I'm interviewing and the stories which I'm uncovering haven't been told before by these people. And they're massive audiences. Like, let's take Laura Woods and Tubes and Smithy, for example. Like, they've done interviews countless times. Like, they've interviewed people as well, of course. So we know their main stories. We know the main things that make up who they are. But rarely do you hear people talk about the stories from their trips. And whenever you talk to anyone, when we can finally go back to the pub and speak to our mates again, whenever you speak to anyone, it's always the trips that you've had, the stories from holidays that make up the best memories from our lives. So it was nice as well to speak to these people and give them an outlet to be like retrospective and look back on these elements of their life, because in lockdown it can feel, like I say, like life's a bit boring, but everyone's done amazing things in their life. So it's nice to, for example, I had Savannah Marshall, that episode's not actually out yet, but she's a world champion boxer on, and when you do these chats, you're like, I hope people enjoy it. And I came away from that and we were talking for 2 hours, and she was chewing my ear off about all these amazing things she's done in her life as a boxer. And she came away and she was thanking me for inviting him onto the podcast. And I'm like, this little world champion boxer who's done like interviews for Sky Sports and like mad things like that. And she was thanking me, which I was just like, you know what? I'm onto something here. People are happy doing this podcast. And if people are happy doing this podcast, then hopefully people are happy listening to it as well.
It does seem like a really good concept, and something that, as you say, it's not something that you hear necessarily with like guest format podcasts and things like that. So yeah, I do think that works really well. So obviously, as it is based around traveling, you've got to love traveling yourself, surely.
Yeah.
So what is your let's say top places that you've been for yourself?
Cool. So I love Europe as well. It's often people just go as far as possible and try and, like I said earlier, like travel to as far as possible and forget the places that surround them. But like I always say, my favorite country is Portugal. I've been to a lot of countries, and Portugal, just for me, has so much. It's really diverse. The north and the south differ quite a lot. You get a lot of sun. Like, I absolutely love the sun when you go away. Coming from England, like for me, to get on a plane to go somewhere, it's got to be hot. Because if you stay in England, it can be rainy. Like, let's get on a plane, go somewhere really hot. So like Lisbon's my favorite city in the world, and if anyone's not been, then I would advise people, when we get out of lockdown, book yourself a trip to Lisbon, because it's absolutely amazing. It's a city which has everything. It's the architecture, like there's tiled walls, tiled floors of like it's genuinely art, and it's the entire city that it's covered by, and you get cobbled streets, and it's called the City of Seven Hills, so you can spend the day just hiking around this city, and it's incredible. And then you've got elements of food there, so you've got like food halls, the Time Out food market. It's a massive hall with benches in the middle, and basically around all the edge of it, you've got the best restaurants from the whole of Lisbon serving up one dish, which their speciality is. So you can go and have like the best burger, for example, best burger and chips, and then the people you're with can go around, okay, I'm going to have the best fish, I'm going to have pastel de natas, I'm going to have, I don't know, the best pizza or whatever. And you come back and it's this communal environment where you can each have your perfect meal, but it's the best meal from that city. So it's a really great place to go if you love food. The US is another place I love. Maybe not for culture, but a place like Las Vegas. Like, Las Vegas is like nowhere else in the world. Like, as soon as you're able to go to Las Vegas, as soon as you hit 21, go to Las Vegas and just experience it, because there are a few places in the world which are completely unique, and Las Vegas definitely feels like one of those places. Like, time is just a forgotten concept there. You can just be in a bar at like 4 a.m. in the morning, and you can go, okay, I'm going to order dinner, and you could just get whatever you want, and just there's the concept of time, just like I say, doesn't exist. And like casinos, for example, they deliberately don't have windows, so that when you're playing slots and all the games are out there, you forget what time it is, and they kind of want you to continue to spend money. So it's just a really strange place. And yeah, I've been to lots of places around the US, and it's a place I love. But strangely, I'm not as well traveled as perhaps you might imagine from doing the podcast, but it's basically because in lockdown you evaluate your priorities and you start going, okay, when I come out of lockdown, what do I want my life to look like? And I was definitely doing that, and it was a process which led me to be like, okay, traveling sits right at the top of my priorities now. Like, don't get me wrong, I was going on city breaks like pretty much twice a month to football grounds. Like, that's another way I love to travel. But let's say far-flung places like South America. I've never been to South America, but always wanted to explore them. But now I'm kind of going, you know what, money, stuff like that doesn't matter. All that matters is life experiences, memories, and creating those kind of memories with your friends and your loved ones. So travel and the experience of hosting the podcast and starting the podcast is kind of my opportunity to like bleed these people dry of information about the best places to go in the world, so that when I can get on a plane again, I can go and explore the places they recommend.
So what's top of your list for places that you want to go when we're finally out of lockdown?
So I really want to go to Southeast Asia and explore Southeast Asia properly, but there's a country called Bhutan which really intrigues me. I don't know if you've heard of it, mate.
No, I can't say.
No, it's a weird one. It's like neighbours Nepal, so it's right at the top of Southeast Asia, above countries like Laos and Burma. In that central zone, and it's a really unique country because their concept is that instead of money and currency, they value happiness, which is a really nice mantra and something that we in the Western world could definitely learn from. So if you look them on paper, you'd see them as one of the poorest countries in the world, but basically everyone in this country is happy. Is happy with what they've got, and they've not got a lot. And you often find that in the poorest places of the world, that people who don't have a lot are really, really happy with what they've got. And in the UK, in my own life, but not so much anymore, but definitely in the past, I've been I've been materialistic. Like, for example, I've gone and spent money on a fast car. I've gone and got the new iPhone when it comes out and stuff like that. And you start going, this stuff doesn't matter. Like, it does not matter if I've got this stuff. So Bhutan, really, really interesting. You can't just go and book a flight there. It's quite a concept you've got to organise. You've got to get assigned a tour guide when you want to go to the country, and it costs £250 per day to be in this country. So, which sounds crazy straight away, but what they do is they organise everything for you. So they sort out your food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They assign you a guide. They assign you a place to sleep, obviously, like a hotel, and they take you around the country to show you the best of the country. So it's an expensive concept, but what I like about it is that a lot of the places around the world and a lot of the best places, everyone knows about them. So whether that be like countries like Thailand, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Thailand was like a forgotten concept, or like unknown, for example, but you go to Thailand now and it's heaving. Everyone from the Western world knows about Thailand. You go to Bhutan and they've got this element of the unknown about them. And by introducing this £250 a day thing, you're not going to find budget backpackers there. And whilst obviously budget backpackers bring a certain vibe and it's a good place to hang out, it's going to be a more cultural experience, and it's not going to be flooded. So when we get off this call, mate, have a look at Bhutan, because it's just it's a mad country.
Well, I was going to ask you this a little bit earlier, because you said about Lisbon, and I've not been there.
Okay.
So I've only been to. I've not done a whole lot. I've been to Italy, Zante, France, and Spain. So that, like, the most basic countries you could probably go to for holidays. So
it's all good, though,
if there were some places that you would suggest that I go, minus the ones that you've probably already said.
Yeah, I'll start you off with an easy one then. Because like Bhutan, it's like, even when I say that, I'm like, let's be honest, like, I probably won't go there for 5 years or whatever until I like find a really like window in my life that presents itself for that. But like, okay, I'll start you off. Like, do you go away with your mates? Is that often how you travel?
I've not done yet, but
yeah, if you're going away with with like friends or like people of a similar age, and you're of drinking age, get yourself to Eastern Europe, man. Like Eastern Europe is such a great place. But Budapest is a city I love, in Hungary. It's one of the best places you can go for bars, and it's got essentially what are called ruined bars. So they're old buildings which were derelict, which bars have turned into bars, and they've all got their little quirks about them. So they're kind of still a little bit run down, but you can go get drinks for ridiculously cheap. And as a result, obviously, it's turned into like a stag do destination. Like you see Brits abroad there, and they're like down in pints for like £1. But if you actually go and see the country and the city for more than just the bars, it's an amazing place. There's loads and loads of street art in Budapest, and for example, there's a place called Fisherman's Bastion, which honestly looks like something out of Harry Potter. You go up this what do you call them, like a cart up the hill, and you get to the top and you're in Fisherman's Bastion. You look over the whole of Budapest, got these mad views, and it looks like a mini Hogwarts. So a great place to go to. You can get flights for like £100. I'm actually going there in a few months, fingers crossed, to watch the Formula One. And accommodation's like £40 a night for 4 of us. So it's really, really cheap, really affordable, and somewhere I definitely recommend.
All right. So what about, I mean, you said you've not done a whole lot in the US, but...
I've done a few, to be fair. I've done a little bit in the US, like 4 or 5 trips.
Okay, where of them places is probably the best, would you say, and suggest to go?
I had an amazing time, and it's a bit basic, but I had an amazing time in Orlando. We did this, my girlfriend and I did this trip where, crazy story, I'll try and cut it down for you, but I assume you know that Thomas Cook went under, and it was a travel company which is like a staple of the UK. But we had our flights booked with Thomas Cook to go to Greece, and we were buzzing for it. And basically, the night that Thomas Cook went under, we were going to fly the next morning. So we're watching the news, like, what's going to happen here? We've spent like maybe like a couple of grand on this all-inclusive trip or whatever to go to Greece, flights, everything with Thomas Cook. Like, if Thomas Cook go under, we're screwed. So we're going to fly at like 7 a.m. the next morning. The news is like, Thomas Cook's going under, blah, blah, blah. And everyone else is just like, meh, it doesn't bother me. We're like, this is affecting me like directly. So we're thinking, if this company goes out like tonight, what happens? If this company goes under next week whilst we're away, what happens? Do we not fly home? Do we get booted out of our hotel? There's so many different elements to it. But basically, they went under, long story short, at like 3 a.m. And then our flight was at 7 a.m. that same day. So we're like, brilliant. So we're not going to Greece. So we have to quickly like adapt. And obviously we've got holiday booked from work. So on the phone to my manager, like, oh, can you give me an extra day? Because now what would be a week's holiday is turning into like 6 days if I can get away like immediately. There's 10 slots left in first class. And we're going, you know what? His flight leaves tomorrow. Like, are they going to still have 10 seats in first class by then? So we go, let's do it. Let's go to Miami. Book these flights. We get to like the check-in, and you know when they give you your flight tickets to the boarding passes, they give us it, and it says like 4A, and I'm like, oh my god, I've never had a single digit before. Shit, single digits. That must mean first class. And then we get in first class, and I'm there like ripped jeans and like fully not prepared to be on first class, like completely outside of like what everyone looks like around me. And spoiler, I got in first class. Mad experience, like something I will never do again in my life. Like those tickets must have cost like numerous thousands of pounds. First class, like mad food, unlimited drinks. Like you just get treated like a different person, which is obviously not great because you should treat everyone around you the same, whether they're in first class or whatever. But it just felt like everyone around you was like god tier of people, and I was just like completely out of my depth. But
you kind of got blessed with it as well, because it, like, say it was a really short flight, it still would have been like fun, but the fact that you would go to Miami, that's a long flight in first class.
It was unreal as well, because it was like a day flight. So like usually, to be fair, there would be benefits of flying on a first class flight if you were going to try and sleep, because you just put the bed down and go for a sleep. But it was like in the day, so it was like you get breakfast, lunch and dinner on this flight, and then you get like a chair which you've got your legs completely stretched out on, and anytime you want a drink, you just ring the bell and get a drink, and you're watching films and stuff like that. And the time just flew by, and you're like, I don't even want to get off the plane. Whereas usually you fly and you're like, just get me off this plane, especially on a long haul one. But yeah, Orlando's a mad place as well. Like,
I was about to ask that. I was about to say, was the actual place good as well?
Yeah, like we flew to Miami. Didn't love Miami. Like people in Miami, it sounds harsh to say people, but like generally speaking, the people in Miami were a bit showy. Like it's what you tend to see, like people driving fast cars and like flashing their lifestyle and stuff like that. Got some amazing restaurants in Miami that I went to, but we then took an internal flight down to Orlando and spent a few days down in Orlando with some friends we've got out in the US, and we went to Universal Studios, which was awesome. Just mad, just going on the best rides, and yeah, going out and just when you're in the US, just eating great food. It's really, really good food, like portion sizes that could feed 4 people. Just mad. Awesome place.
Well, it seems like one thing you really love about the travel as well is the food.
Yeah.
So I want to know what are some of the best countries for food.
Yeah, good question. Italian food. Italian food's always good. Like I can't say I've ever had a bad experience with Italian food, but I've eaten my best Italian food in another country, and that is Miami. Like I touched on there in terms of restaurants. Like I went to a restaurant in Miami called Pan Avino, and it's like this amazing Italian restaurant. It's like this really quaint little place, and you go in there and it's really dimly lit, and you've got a bloke who's making pasta for you fresh in like the bay window in the front of the shop. So he's like making it fresh and cutting it, and you're like, well, I mean, it doesn't get any more like fresh than that. So you sit down and like I say, dimly lit, and it feels like you're in Italy. And I know, of course, you could just be in Italy if you chose to go to Italy, but it gives you that really authentic experience. And the food was just amazing. But yeah, like you say, food when I go away is like something I really look to try and get the best of, and not by any means going to like the best restaurant or the most expensive restaurant. Like I feel like you can go and get an amazing meal at like a really average price, or even like go and get some street food and pay pennies for it, and it's like cooked fresh to order, and just like by some of the chefs who do it every single day, and they absolutely nail the recipe, and it's the best food that you can taste. But yeah, definitely try and make sure when you're in a place, or at least from my opinion at least, get the best food from that place.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, to be fair, I think people do probably go for the more expensive restaurants, the Michelin star places and all that. Whereas, yeah, if you're in a different country, you could probably experience it more from a smaller place.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So I want to know a little bit more about you. So, are you a film or a TV person?
Good question. You know what? When I was in school, I'd love to have been a film person, and I kind of pretended I was because I was doing film studies. But like TV all day for me. Like I love TV because you can really, really get to know characters. Because like for example, there's so many good British TV dramas on at the moment. But like for example, we're watching like Unforgotten, my girlfriend and I at the moment, which is a really good TV drama. And in a film, you've got a 2-hour window, let's say, and you've got to get to know the characters, you've got to get to know the storyline, set it up. This is going back to my film study these days, but like essentially you break a film up from like what is an equilibrium, which is like a state of normality, and then you get what is called a break in the equilibrium, which is when something happens. Every film will follow this. And then you've got the quest of the film, which is like where the main characters go on a quest or try and resolve the problem, which is broken equilibrium. And at the end, you get a return to that equilibrium. That's how every single film will go. You take that and apply that to any film. But in TV, you've got like, let's say 10 episodes, an hour long or 40 minutes long. So in that, you get to know the characters like really, really well. And like you look at a show like Breaking Bad, for example, like which is like my go-to answer for the best TV show ever made. The character arc in Breaking Bad, because it's, I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe like 6 or 7 seasons, is just
7, I think. 7. Yeah.
You see Walt at the start of Breaking Bad, and you just completely, you put him next to the Walt at the end of Breaking Bad. I won't drop any spoilers, but he is just a different person. And that character arc would not have been able to take place in a movie because 2 hours would not have been enough time. But over the course of 7 seasons, you see Walt completely break down into this narcissistic, horrible man, and like vice versa. You see Skylar. She just turns into the victim, and that for me is why TV is just elite. And it's just like it can be like mini movies where you get cliffhangers at the end of each one, and you're like, oh my god, like I was going to go to bed and he's just dropped this bomb, like I need to see what happens. But then you just know you're going to get to the end of the next episode and they're going to drop another cliffhanger, and you're like, before you know it, you're like 4 hours in. But yeah, TV is just elite, and there's so much good stuff to choose from at the moment.
Well, my follow-up to that was going to be what are your top ones? So you said about Breaking Bad. Is there any others that
there
like,
are
stand out?
Yeah, I would say I want to make sure I get the right answer, because you sometimes just say the first thing that comes to your head. I want to say, right, you know, I'm assuming you're a TV man as well. Prison Break. What's your thoughts on Prison Break?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I haven't watched any of the new ones, but the original ones.
Yeah,
like
that's what I was gonna say.
What 1 to 4? My interest slipped a bit at 4, and I never watched it when it started back up.
Yeah, my interest slipped at like 2. Which is just mad to like even have it in the conversation for the best TV shows. But like series 1 of Prison Break, elite TV, like the most mental TV show. Storyline's amazing, characters amazing, like you're on the edge of your seat every single episode. And like some of this, like the ways that, for example, like not a massive spoiler, but like the tattoos on his body, how they work and stuff like that, like the storyline is so clever and well written. It's just a great show. But at the end of it, like you've got a show called Prison Break, and like they get out of prison, you're like, right, so that's surely the end.
Did you make it past the second series?
Yeah, and I did. I watched them break out of the prison and then get back into another prison and break out of that prison.
Yeah, I was about to say the game. Yeah, my interest slipped. It was because then it started turning into like a weird like FBI kind of program. It slipped off like proper weird.
Like the company when they started getting the company involved, and you're just like, oh, the writers are just dragging this out, aren't they? Like, how can we milk this for another season?
I didn't even give it a chance when it started back up. I was like, I'm kind of just done with it at this point. Is there any others that stand out in your head? Did you ever do like Game of Thrones or?
I didn't. You know, I'm not like a mad fantasy person. Like people always tell me to watch Game of Thrones. Like they're like, oh, you'd love it, and I'm equally like, oh, not for me. And you know, you ever get this feeling when you're watching a TV show or you're about to, and you see it's like 10 seasons long, and you just feel like so daunted, and you're like,
yeah.
Do you actually know how many hours of my life I'm going to have to commit to this? I want to get to the end of it. Like, I'm going to be like 35 by the time I finish watching this show. Like, it better be good if you're going to recommend this to me. So, yeah, I much more prefer like a singular season of a show. Like, random one that comes to my head, like You. I know it's had 2 seasons and coming back with a 3rd one, but like a self-contained like 6-episode show. There's like so many to choose from on Netflix. You just came to mind, but even like Behind Her Eyes, which I watched recently, was like a pretty decent show, quite a nice format. Would recommend it. Mad twist.
Yeah, I'm on episode 3 of it at the minute.
You shouldn't have dropped that. I won't go any further then. But yeah, it's a really cool show.
Yeah. There is loads coming out at the minute on Netflix. Over lockdown, I'm trying to think. There was one. Stranger or something like that on Netflix.
Stranger, yeah.
Yes, ones like that where it's just one series, beginning, done.
Have you seen Safe? If you like that.
Yes, yeah.
It's so good, man. That was a really good show, actually. To be fair, for a really good TV show. Class. And also, like you say, like it starts and finishes in one series, and you get what you need from it. And like the writers. The only problem with shows like that, like The Stranger, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, because you should watch it if you haven't. But you kind of feel like at the end of episode 8, the writers can just, it's irrelevant what they've shown you up to now. They can just invent an ending.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't depend on anything they've shown you. And you're like, oh my God, like, where's that come from? Like, you just pulled a name out of a hat and gone, it's like Cluedo, like, oh, he's going to kill her using the fucking iron wrench in the ballroom. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh my god, that doesn't link to anything we've seen. But yeah, a good show nonetheless.
Well, I think that's the thing as well that is becoming a bit more of a thing now. You know, like early when you said films, you've got 2 hours span to get to know the characters and everything. And I felt like these limited series kind of take like a film script and like, pull it out and actually make it so you get to know them. So it's not necessarily one of them where they can go on for seasons and seasons, but it could work as a film. But
yeah, it would. Like often those shows would work better as a film. Like if you got like for example like a 6-episode TV series, and you boiled it down from what is 40 minutes an episode, maybe like 4 hours. If you boiled it down to 2 and you cut out all the naff stuff that you don't actually need to see, would make like an epic film. But I feel like so much money's going into TV now. Like you look at how popular Netflix is, and cinema is obviously at the moment on the decline. So I feel like money's moving into TV, and you're seeing like big name actors who before would have been like Hollywood A-listers are actually producing and working in TV shows, which you wouldn't have seen 10, 20 years ago. So it's testament to what the TV industry's become, really.
I suppose it's because it keeps people there for longer. Really,
True.
That's kind of what it boils down to, really. I want to go back a little bit to your traveling, really, and just talk about like any interesting stories that you have. Like, have you been anywhere where something really interesting happened, or just any sort of stories that you've gained from it?
Yeah, I would say the main way I was traveling most recently, so the stories which just sit fresh on my mind, are like going to football games. So I have like this corkboard in our bedroom, and like the way I like collect stuff from travels is getting a pin from each stadium I've been to and putting it on the corkboard. So I'm like trying to fill up this corkboard of like football teams' badges, and like the fondest memories I've got at the moment is like in 2019 back end, I went to Borussia Dortmund with my brother, and we did it inside 48 hours. And it's a way of traveling which probably won't even exist in the future, because it just won't be possible with these mad checks they're going to put in place. But flew out of an airport in the Saturday morning, went to the city centre, dropped all our stuff in the hotel, and I don't know if you've been on these scooters called Lime scooters. Have you come across them?
Yeah, just the electric scooters that you can.
Yeah. So like, mad, mate. Honestly, like we just picked one up from the outside of our hotel. It was the first time I'd ever seen them. I was like, what? So I just scan the QR code and then I'll just get to ride this scooter. So me and my brother just tearing it up around Dortmund city centre, flying around the place in what would have taken us like an hour to like walk from our hotel to the city centre, and we've got there in like 5 minutes, just like tearing around the streets of Dortmund. And then we get there and like eating currywurst in the stand, and then we go and watch Dortmund. And we're watching the yellow wall in like its glory, and we saw them. Dortmund beat Fortuna Dusseldorf 5-0. Jadon Sancho scoring twice, Royce scoring twice. It was like bucket list stuff. It was like it's just one of those really, really lucky experiences, and that kind of stuff. And the way I'd say, and why I love travel so much, is that like that 48-hour window I remember so vividly, and it's a memory that my brother and I will share for the rest of our lives, and we'll be able to look back on that. And there'll be more to come in the future, but I couldn't tell you what I did on another random 48 hours weekend. I can't pinpoint that as closely, but travel just sticks out from the rest of the stuff, and like memories and stuff like that you hold closer to you. Yeah, you remember them more clearly when you've been abroad, I would say.
Yeah, you've kind of made me want to travel a lot more. I won't lie, just talking to you now. All right, so last question that I sort of finish every podcast on is what does success mean to you in your life? If you got to an old age, what would it mean for your life to have been a success for you?
Good question. It's nice, isn't it? A nice deep one. I would say I'm someone who does value success, and it's only because I like to see like the hard work I put in be like rewarded. I wouldn't say that I need for example, even though I've started this podcast, I'm not there going, oh, I want to have X amount of followers or I want to make X amount of money. That's not the way I'd look at it. Success for me would be creating something that I'm proud of and entertaining, informing, or creating something which people get some pleasure from. So like in lockdown, I had people messaging me saying, thank you so much for making the podcast. It's allowed me to remember and think about times which I've been away in the time that feels pretty bleak. And that to me is infinitely more important and more valuable to me than like money. Like it doesn't even come close. So that stuff really is a measure of success for me. And like the way I look at it, like if we've got thousands of listeners listening at the moment to the podcast, it's like, what does that look like if we double our or triple our or quadruple our audience? Hopefully we're going to have that positive effect, but on a wider audience, and you'll have more people who are listening to what we do and getting some sort of pleasure from it. So yeah, I would say that's how I measure success rather than like money in a bank account or numbers on a screen.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, mate, for having me. I really appreciate it.